Hi, my name's Mike Gant, and this is, I think I'm calling this the Duty of a Man podcast, which is a companion to the Duty of a Man book that I wrote. And the title of this video, this episode, is What's So Special About a Man? Because I thought near the beginning of this long series, or what I hope to be a long series, I thought it would be good to explain why there is a book that focuses on the duty of a man, why there is this podcast. Why am I doing this? I'm a preacher of the gospel. I'm retired now from work. I had both a secular career and a career as a minister for a time. But I'm retired from that. But what I do spend all of my working hours on now, and from which I never hope to retire, is preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I do that by writing, including things like this. So why does someone who cares first and foremost about getting the message about Jesus Christ and the Bible out to people, to encourage people who've heard about him and love him and want to follow him, but also to get the word out to people who don't love him or haven't heard much about him, and tell them that they need to get on board? Why am I focusing and narrowing the focus this way? Because men are the pivot. Men are the place on which everything turns. If you want the world to be all right, the nations have to be all right. If you want a nation to be all right, families have to be all right. And if you want a family to be right, the man is going to be right. If you got a family and everyone in it is right except for the man, it's going to be a mess. If the man's right, then the whole family's got a better chance. And I want to talk about, what's special about being a man, what's different about it. It's hard to talk about because in the world we live in, it's become an obstacle course for men. And the only way through it is through Jesus Christ and the Bible. Now, I know there's a lot of books about men these days, which is good. Wish there were more. A lot of podcasts about men. That's good. Wish there were more. And I'm certainly not familiar with all of them. I'm not even familiar with most of them. But I'm familiar with enough of them to say that not enough of them talk about Jesus Christ in the Bible. And I don't think you can really fully understand the role of men without Jesus Christ in the Bible. And I don't think you can effectively change people's minds without talking about that. Now, some people say, well, yeah, but that's introducing a whole new subject. No, it's not, because we can only be sure of what men ought to be by Jesus Christ and the Bible. That's where truth is established and set forth. And the whole society, almost all the institutions of society, are geared against men because they're geared against Jesus and the Bible. Men are expected to be leaders of their wives and of their children. In other words, leaders of their families. And anything that speaks out along that line just makes people, the hair on their arms stand up. They don't know what to, some of you right now are listening to me saying, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? I'm going to say the truth that deep down everybody knows. God expects men to form and sustain the family. It doesn't mean he's more important. He doesn't have more value as a person than the woman or the children. God sees every individual as important, but a man has specific responsibilities. It's what Harry Truman called the buck stops here. Those used to be an old expression about people passing the buck. Nobody wants to make the decision. Nobody wants to make the call. Just pass the buck to the next guy. And Harry Truman saw a sign and had one made for his office that says, "The buck stops here." He was the president the first couple of years of my life. I, of course, didn't know that at the time, but I read history books, so I know that. So it's within my lifetime that he lived and made that point. And his point specifically was that as president of the United States, he couldn't shift the decision to somebody else. When a decision had to be made and everybody else had shifted it, it was going to end up on his desk and he was going to have to decide. And that's the way a man is when it comes to a family. And there's all sorts of ways that people won't decide. A woman won't decide, or children won't decide. They decide something different. And a man has to do, he can't blame anybody else. If a man's family doesn't go right, he can't blame anyone else. So you've got to be determined to go to the mat for your family. And I agree, everything's stacked against you these days. If a man tries to act the least bit in his responsibilities, it's called toxic masculinity, or he's called all kinds of names, because we live in a very feminized society, a very well, you can't really say matriarchal society, because that would imply that women want to have children, but they've lost that. It's all about feminism. Women want to change places with men, or have the same place as a man, and they've got it in today's society, at least as much as you can have it when you're fighting reality. And they want the decision. They want to be able to do all the things that men can do, and there's no end to the harm that brings to society when women feel that way. I mean, for one thing, it's the foundation. Feminism is the foundation of transgenderism. There'd be no such thing as transgenderism if the foundation had not been laid for it by feminism, which says that there's no differences between a man and a woman that can't be navigated, and that women should be able to do all the things that men can do. And it's just not the case. Men and women were designed to be married. You know that from the Bible. They were designed to be married. They weren't designed to be single. When I hear young people, I know what they're doing. They're struggling with loneliness, and they say things like, "Well, maybe God wants me to be single," or "I'm, God, hardly ever is that true. Occasionally it's true. Jesus was called to be single, but there was a very practical reason for that, and that is that his whole mission was to come and die for the sins of the world. He was going to die in his early 30s, and all he would have produced by a marriage is maybe a few years of happiness, and then he would have produced a widow and orphans, which is never good, but it was a lot worse back then than it is today. Today, women are just married to the government, and they just depend on government, and they guilt their family and friends to help them, and they depend on the government for financial aid. A lot of women don't want to be married. They don't want to have children, or they want to put it off indefinitely. And then when it's finally time to do it, then they can't do it. A man has got to fight all that. I mean, it's hard enough anyway. He's got to fight all that, and he's got to find a woman, and with that woman have children and raise them up. That's God's ideal. That's what sex is. It's for the family. It's to fill the earth and make it multiply. That's it. It's not for pleasure. It's not for personal choice. And they talk about, well, what goes on between consenting adults is no business. No, yes, it is. Because anytime you put a man and a woman together, you got the potential of creating a human being, and that human being is not going to be able to care for itself for a couple of decades. And so it's very serious business when that subject, sex, is very serious business, but it's God's business. And his consent matters as much or more as the consent of the individuals involved. And people have tried to put that consent out of it. But men are, you go all the way back to Adam. Adam failed his family. He failed his wife. Why? Because he let her do that. Now maybe she did it. Maybe she ate the forbidden fruit when he wasn't looking. But when she ate it, he ate it too. And what he should have done was stopped and looked to God and say, what do we do now? But he followed her. Men, you can't follow a woman. Both of you are going to fall. That's not because anything's wrong with her. It's because she wasn't designed to lead you. You were designed to lead her. And real leadership between a man and a woman looks like a beautiful couple dancing on a ballroom floor. The man is leading, but it doesn't look like it. You can barely see it. Why? Because he's doing it through his fingertips. He's just the slightest little touch, and she's sensitive to his touch, and they're moving together, and they're thinking alike. That's the way marriage was meant to work. But there's got to be somebody that's responsible for making the call. Hey, which way are we going to twirl here? Which way are we going to go? You can't sit there and talk about it and negotiate it out. It's got to be, you got to decide and move on. And that's what a man is supposed to do. And a father has got to train his children. That discipline that he gives his children has got to be from him. My father was a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps. And my brothers and I received discipline from him. And man, was it what we needed. At least I know it's what I needed. Now, when I was growing up, and even in my early adult years, I whined and complained. Oh, my dad doesn't ever say he loves me. My dad doesn't, say I'm proud of you. I only wish my dad would do this, wanting my dad to emote all over me, emote about me. Well, I'm infinitely better off that he gave me discipline and didn't give me praise or affection. He gave me what I needed most. Fathers have got to discipline their children, to train them, to be intentional about it. One of my biggest mistakes as a parent was not being more intentional about the training. I just, I saw what happened in my life growing up, and I just wasn't specific and intentional enough about the training. And specifically, I wasn't intentional enough in training about Jesus and the Bible. A man has got to teach his children. He's got to lead his family. He's got to follow Jesus. You need to read the Bible every day, and you need to live by it, and you need to teach that to your family. And your wife should be your partner, and the two of you together should be a team, but you've got to be, you're responsible for the duo. You're responsible for pulling yourselves together. A man will hardly ever have to tell a good woman what to do because she's smart enough to do it. But occasionally, even the smartest of women will become deceived, like Eve was, and it's up to the man to take a stand and say, honey, I'm sorry, we can't do that. And most men don't want to do that because it's misery. It's sheer misery to say something that a woman doesn't want to hear. It could be like, that's awful. And no man in his right mind wants that. But you have to expect that, and you'll know when those times come, and you have to act on that, because what hope does she have? What hope do your children have if you concede leadership of the family to her? They weren't designed to lead the family. You were. And that's what makes men different. That's where the man is where the buck stops. You've got to take responsibility for how your family's going. And hopefully everybody in your family will do what they're supposed to. But when they don't, you got to pull everybody together and say, look, we got to get this thing right. This is what we're going to do. Got any ideas, anybody? Let's put them on the table. Get everybody working like a team. But you cannot outsource that responsibility to anyone else. A man has to be responsible for the welfare of his family, physically and spiritually. You provide, you protect, you procreate, and you do that in the physical realm, and you do that in the spiritual realm. Get your Bible, look to Jesus, live for him, and you'll be a man.